Hi, this is Dan Bedondi reporting a special segment of the InfoWars Nightly News on our October 30th, 2012 edition of the Nightly News and our special Halloween report. And have you ever wondered the history of Halloween, where it came from?
Yeah, and something tells me you're going to tell us the wrong history of Halloween.
Where bobbing of apples came from, bonfires, jack-o'-lanterns and such. Well, today we're going to talk to, back by popular demand, Mr. William Schnobelen, which I had on InfoWars Money Bomb.
Not Bill, I lived off of human blood and wafers for a year and a half, Schnobelen.
And I chose to become a vampire because it seemed, sexier somehow. And so anyhow, I went through about a year and a half where basically I lived on nothing but human blood and Catholic communion wafers. That's all I ate.
Wow. A couple weeks ago. And before we get to the segment, folks, I want to encourage everybody to go to InfoWarsStore.com right now and purchase Bloodlines of the Illuminati.
Fantastic book of fiction.
It's by Fritz Springmeier, great book, 500-something pages, packed full of information about the Illuminati bloodlines. And with the order, every order you get on InfoWarsStore.com, you get a copy of the Citizen's Handbook and a couple of cool stickers for your car, to display your patriotism. And again, Bill Schnobelen, he's a former Illuminati.
No, he's not.
Former 90th degree Freemason.
No, he's a former third-degree Mason.
Former satanic high priest.
Nope, he was never a Satanist.
Former Mormon, former Catholic priest. He's been there, done it all, and now he's on the good side. And without further ado, back by popular demand, how you doing, Bill?
He's on the good side? That's rather egotistical, isn't it?
It's great to be here. Absolutely.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to have you back. And
Denied.
Now, Halloween, a lot of people, in public, they go out and celebrate, dress the kids and go, ghouls and goblins and all this stuff, but not knowing where's Halloween really come from.
I think most people go out and celebrate, especially if they have kids or maybe if they're younger and go to parties and stuff, celebrate Halloween pretty much as a secular holiday. I don't believe too many people really think it's very religious. And if it is a religious celebration, then they celebrate it more on November 1st, which would be All Saints' Day.
What's the origins of it? What is a cult connection with this? And a lot of people are misinformed what Halloween really is. And I think if they knew exactly what Halloween was, they wouldn't be celebrating the satanic holiday.
First of all, Halloween is not a satanic holiday.
Well, yes, that's very true. And you go all the way back really to the dawn of history.
If you go way back to the dawn of history, there's no Halloween celebration.
And you'll find that in the cultures around Bible lands and the cultures of pagan Europe, the pagan British Isles.
This is one thing that drives me nuts, is this idea of pagan. Pagan is a term that is used for the people who do not practice Christianity. So whatever religion is not Christian or not Catholic is pagan. Back in olden times, let's say 1st century AD in Europe, you had various tribes, Celtic tribes, Gallic tribes. You had various tribes in Europe. They didn't go around saying, hey, nice pagan ritual last night. Yeah, it was a nice pagan ritual. How was your pagan ritual? Well, my pagan ritual is okay. They didn't call themselves pagans. They called themselves probably by their tribal name, like the Carnutes or the Aquitanes or the Tuatates or whatever. And they had their Druid priests who may have referred to themselves as Druids or maybe referred to themselves as something else. But they didn't consider themselves to be pagan. They considered them to be their tribal name, and these are the gods that they followed. Then you had the Romans and the Greeks and the other groups, other cultures around there. And again, they didn't refer to themselves as pagans. The word pagan is something that comes up later on. So to call pagan Europe is basically just saying the people of that time who were not Christian.
This night was considered part of a pageant of festivals that were of course pagan in origin. They were satanic in origin.
He keeps throwing this word out there like by itself pagan has some kind of an awful association. It doesn't. It just represents somebody who wasn't practicing Christianity at that time. And in Europe at that time, around the 1 AD, or 1 CE, they didn't even know anything about Christianity or Catholicism. It hadn't been really born yet.
They were basically, ways of celebrating the change of seasons. And of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, this is when the nights started getting longer and the weather started getting colder. And it was believed that on this night, or Halloween night, that the god of the dead...
The god of the dead? Bill, the 1 week course that you took with the Frosts to get your Wicca degree or whatever it was you tried to get through them, this is what you learned? You didn't learn anything. You need to go back and study more.
Was going to die and then be reborn later.
They're showing this description of Halloween like it has something to do with what Bill Schnobelen is saying. It doesn't have anything to do with what Bill Schnobelen is saying. It's talking about Halloween, a celebration of Halloween. Bill is talking about whatever it is that he's making up in his mind right now, and this guy's showing Halloween.
And of course, he was reborn on the next feast, which would have been Yule, which is December 23rd, 24th, somewhere in there. And so this time that he was dying was a time of great fear in these people. And so the way they dealt with that is by human sacrifice.
What? Okay, first of all, we don't know what was in the mindset of the people at this time. And again, I'm taking it all the way back to about the 1st century AD, because I'm assuming that's what he's talking about is these old ancient practices in Europe. We don't know their mindset around this time of year. They may have been fearful, they may have been hopeful, they may have been looking forward to it, they may have been dreading it, but whatever it is, it was something that came up over and over and over again. And to the best of my knowledge, there is no god of death that they celebrated around the time of Halloween, or what we consider to be October 1st, October 31st, November 1st now.
They felt that if they could shed enough blood, especially the blood of children.
And first of all, they didn't commit human sacrifice on a grand scale. The whole idea of human sacrifice back among the Celtic people and the Gallic peoples around this time, there's different arguments for it. There is written evidence by Strabo and Caesar of the Gauls, and now we're going back to the France, Spain, Europe area, where supposedly people were put into wicker bodies and then burned, and animals were burned in there. However, again, this is highly questionable, because the larger you build a wicker being, is what they were supposed to have built, and this happened around May 1st. But the bigger you would have to build this thing and fill it with animals and then fill it with people, it would probably break. It would probably topple, because there would just be too much weight in it. And even so, the beans inside would be able to rock it back and forth and knock it over and break it and escape. And the logistics of it is very odd. So there's some question about it. Caesar at the time was really trying to spread propaganda about the people that he was conquering. And he was also trying to get support from the Roman Senate to continue to pay his military so that he could grow these campaigns and extend Roman territory. And one of the ways that he had to do it, just like today, is you have to vilify the enemy. And so he made them look like they were very barbaric people. However, a lot of the evidence that we have today shows that the Celts and Gauls at the time were actually very intelligent, highly artistic, and had very complex social structured civilization. So human sacrifice causes problems in the social structure. You may have victims of war, slaves who are killed, or you may have criminals who do something and they are sacrificed, they are killed. So this is a possibility. But the evidence that we have for human sacrifice is kind of questionable. There's possibility that maybe people what are called bog people, bogmen, who have been found to have been stabbed or had their throats cut or garroted or something like that. But even so, these bodies are not very common. And again, there's a question about whether or not they actually were human sacrifice. And so basically what I'm saying is there's some evidence for it, but it's still being called into question.
That they could somehow let this passing of their god be a propitious one.
Again, Bill, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no archaeological evidence for a god of death being celebrated or feared around this time for the people who lived in Europe around the 1st century before Christianity came.
You know, and of course, this is all really evil, but we see it even in the Bible, the idea of Molech, the idea of Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, all these different cultures all celebrated this festival.
Bill, Molech is in the Middle East. This is the time of the Canaanites. And Molech is a term that is used for a king. It's not like one deity was Molech. It's the king was called Molech. So it was a title term. And these are the Canaanites, who are in a different part of the world and about 1,000 years before the time of the people in Europe that you're talking about who were pre-Christian. And this is the Middle East, and now you're talking about Europe. So there's a huge span of land between these two people. Molech and whatever concept you have of a European god of the dead have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And Molech, again, is a title, and we don't even know who this god of death is that you're referring to.
By child sacrifice, by throwing babies into a flaming idol or something equally awful.
Oh, Bill, if you are going to accuse these people of doing such a heinous act, you need to give some kind of a citation, some kind of a proof, because otherwise you're just pulling this out of your ass. You're not giving any evidence for it. And to the best of my knowledge, I've never heard of anything like this.
And this is the origins of Halloween.
No, it's not the origins of... You're talking about the Middle East, Bill. The Middle East has absolutely nothing to do with Halloween. Halloween, what we celebrate today, is celebrated on October 31st, which was All Hallows Eve, the evening before All Saints' Day, which was on November the 1st. Around 500, 600 AD, the Roman celebration of All Saints' Day moved from May 13th, May 15th, something like that. I'll look it up and put it down below. And it was moved to November the 1st. So back then, All Saints' Day, which was a celebration of all the Roman ancestors, and it became part of the Christian faith. And instead of celebrating all the ancient ancestors, they also celebrated all the saints, and it was moved to November the 1st. And All Hallows Eve, again, became Halloween. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Middle East. Nothing.
And the problem is that even to this day, it is still a high satanic holiday. It's still a high witch holiday.
No, it is not a high satanic holiday. There are Satanists who probably do celebrate it or celebrate it as a secular holiday, but no, it is not a high satanic holiday. Beltane and Samhain were considered to be one of the most important ones. So Samhain gets a lot of attention for being the most important or the most high of the witch holidays. However, Beltane is just as important, and it is also when the veil is supposed to be very thin. So we have these two, again, complementary, balancing each other out. One is definitely a celebration of life and Beltane and new beginnings. And then Samhain is the understanding of the end and that the time is becoming darker and colder. And yes, it's an understanding and a recognition of our own mortality and death, which is an important thing to understand this time of year. We have to accept death. Death is a part of life. It sounds funny, but it is. And people who are rooted in reality understand this, and that is one of the reasons why Halloween or Samhain is such an important celebration for us.
And that means if you're celebrating it, you're celebrating, basically what some Satanists believe is the devil's birthday.
You know what? You don't have to celebrate Halloween. If you don't want to recognize all the saints, or you don't want to celebrate holidays like Halloween, then don't. But you don't have to make up bullshit stories about our ancestors. You don't have to make up bullshit stories about witches and Satanists and pagans. Just don't celebrate it. That's it.
Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to do anything to celebrate about the devil.
Exactly. And the real name, I think, was called Samhain. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes, it was called Samhain. Depending upon depending upon Gaelic or Manx, or Scottish Gaelic, Irish Gaelic, or Manx, they all have a different description of it. There's different names for it. But yes, Samhain is one of the most common ones, which is the Irish form of Samhain, or the end of summer, which comes from the root word Samhain. Yes.
Yeah, in the Celtic British Isles, Samhain, it's spelled Samhain.
It's really kind of a simplification for us nowadays to look back and assume that Samhain and Beltane and all the names of our common festivals that we recognize, especially in America, all come from one word, but they don't. There's different depending upon if you were from Cornwall or Brittany or England or Ireland or Scotland. You had different names for the various holidays, such as Samhain. Samhain was very much the Irish name for it. Samhain, I think it's Samhain, is more of a Scottish Gaelic version of saying it. Then you have the Manx version, which I can't remember right now, but I'll put it down below. So there are different names. It's not just one name, Samhain, that everybody recognized. It really depended upon which part of, especially Celtic lands you were from, that had a different name for this. And again, those two words, Beltane and Samhain, those two important celebrations, can be traced back linguistically to Old Gaelic words, Samran for Samhain, summertime, the end of summertime, and then Gimreed, which Gia Monios in the Coligny Calendar, which again I'll put below. So these celebrations were definitely very important and go way back.
But we say it as Samhain. And yeah, that's the ancient ancestor. And of course, excuse me, at some time, in the early Christian era, the Catholic Church decided to try and sort of baptize.
I don't think they tried to baptize it. Again, all saints were celebrated, or all ancestors were celebrated by the Romans back around May 13th and May 15th. The church later on moved it to November 1st, probably to coincide with some of the more ancient festivals that were still being celebrated by the peoples for the end of summer, the Samhain time. And because it was a recognition of ancestors, who had passed, a lot of storytelling and stuff like this, it became probably a good time for the church to put All Saints' Day with that time, because a lot of the European peoples were still celebrating Samhain. And so it became just a kind of a logical place to put it. I don't think they tried to baptize it. I think if anything, they tried to work with the people and make it fit, kind of like how we would do today with certain holidays, like celebrating all presidents on one day rather than celebrate different presidents on different days. It just makes it more convenient. Same thing with moving Samhain from May to November.
Halloween and Samhain, and they call it All Hallows Eve. They associated it with All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, which is November 1st on the liturgical calendar.
And this is their way of putting a so-called Christian stamp on something that's evil.
You can't judge it as evil. It's a different form of celebration. It's a different way of practicing. It's a different way of viewing our ancestors and life and death. It's not evil. It's just a different way of looking at things.
Yes. And of course, I don't think you can really do that. You can't take something that's evil and slap some paint on it and all of a sudden it's good. And the trouble is that in many cultures, this is kind of a universal thing. Like many people might know that in Latino countries, they have the Day of the Dead on this.
Again, he's talking about the Day of the Dead. My Spanish is really bad. Dia de Muertos. Dia del Muertos. But the Day of the Dead probably goes back. It probably does have early beginnings. Again, in Spain, France area, it probably does have some kind of a connection to ancient Gallic Celtic practices. Possibly. It may have also evolved completely separate from it. But he's talking about Dia de Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, and he's showing Samhain.
When people, run around dressed up as skeletons and all of that, and it's very similar to Halloween. They just call it by a different name. And see, I don't think that we should be celebrating death. I think we should be celebrating life.
Yes. We spend 364 days of the year celebrating life. We can take one day to recognize the fact that we are mortal, that people have passed before us, that our ancestors have died, that we will one day die, that our children will one day grow up and die. Recognizing the simple fact of our own mortality, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just recognizing it and understanding it. And if anything, that makes life that much more sweeter, that much more wonderful, understanding that we are mortal, that one day we will leave this planet one way or the other. And so, in a way, that makes life much more fantastic, much more beautiful. So it's not that we worship death. It's a recognition and an understanding of it, and it's only one day out of the year.
Exactly.
So, that basically is some of the history. And see, the thing is, Jeremiah the prophet says in Jeremiah 10:1-3 that we are not to learn the ways of the heathen.
Wasn't he a bullfrog? Am I wrong about that, Jeremiah? No?
We are not to follow the paths of the Gentiles, but rather we're to follow what's in the Bible. And the Bible has the feasts of Yahweh, the sacred feasts of Him, that are what we should be doing instead of Christmas and Easter bunnies and Halloween. You know, those are just all pagan holidays that are really abominable in the sight of the Almighty.
And if I'm not correct, during the beginnings of our country, did our ancestors take part in these holidays?
No, really they did not. Halloween was actually illegal in the days of the Puritans.
Halloween was not illegal in this country. The Puritans, well, the majority of the people who came to, well, a portion of a lot of the people who came to America were Puritans. They brought their religious beliefs and their religious practice from Europe over here, especially in England, pretty much because they were Puritans and they suffered a lot of religious persecution. So they came to this country to kind of escape that and to spread their own faith. But the Puritans did not celebrate Christmas. They did not celebrate Easter. They definitely didn't celebrate Halloween. They didn't celebrate anything. The only thing that the Puritans observed was the Sabbath. That was it. They did not practice any holiday. So that is what he is referencing. As for it being illegal, no. Halloween was never illegal in this country.
It was really illegal all through the 18th and a lot of the 19th century in America, and it was only when the influx of Irish immigrants started in the 19th century, some of my ancestors.
The Catholic celebration of All Saints' Day probably did come over from Catholics who brought it to this country, along with all the other celebrations and observations of Catholicism.
Came over here and they brought Halloween with them. And you know how in our country we see that things gradually have gotten more and more, lax or whatever word you want to use. And so people began to celebrate. And of course now it's become a huge marketing thing. I mean, they're trying to make it as big as Christmas.
It is. It's one of the 6 major holidays. There's Mother's Day, Christmas, Father's Day. There's a lot of very big holidays. And yes, Halloween happens to be one of them where people make a lot of money. And a lot of people like to celebrate Halloween.
And but the trouble is, again, it's evil.
Okay, Bill, you keep saying it's evil. The people were evil. The celebration is evil. What makes it evil? Outside of your outdated book, what makes it evil?
And I would just like to share briefly why I'm so passionate about this. I had a personal experience with Halloween when I was 10 years old. And I was out trick-or-treating. And this was, way back before there was anything really sinister about it. I think I was dressed as a little clown or something, going door to door getting candy. And I actually was walking down the street. It was Halloween night, beautiful October evening in the Midwest. And I looked up. And as I looked up, I saw the sky was just full of demons.
Yeah, you probably ate too many Snickers bars and had a little hallucination.
And just black leathery things with red eyes, and their eyes just stared into me. And I could feel something unclean hit my soul at that moment. And I believe at that moment my soul was defiled by the demonic spirits that surround Halloween.
You were very young on Halloween night, and you were defiled by demons. I'm sorry that happened to you. That sounds like a very horrible experience. However, being defiled by demons on Halloween night doesn't make it evil. It makes what happened to you really weird, twisted, and horrible, but it doesn't have anything to do with Halloween today.
Of course, Satanism, I got involved with even the vampire thing, because at one point I had to, if I wanted to progress within the kingdom of darkness, within the brotherhood, as it's called, of Satan, I had to choose. I can either go one way and become a lycanthrope or a werewolf, or I can go the other way and become a vampire. And I chose to become a vampire because it seemed, sexier somehow. And so anyhow, I went through about a year and a half where basically I lived on nothing but human blood and Catholic communion waivers. That's all I ate.